Good afternoon, Who Dat Nation, and happy week 4, Bayou Blitz family. We'd like to welcome you to our Bayou Blitz week 4 post-game show, especially if you're jumping in live. We're going to get to some of your questions, your comments, your criticisms here in a minute. But the Bayou Blitz post-game show is sponsored by Get Checked or Check Out, who runs the Original Go Black and Gold Celebrity Charity Fan Cruise. We're going to tell you more about both as we close out the show. But if you have a pen and paper handy, I want you to write these two things down right now. tcynow.org and the phone number 985-643-6958, and we will tell you why I had had you write both of those down at the end of the show when we talk more about Get Checked or Check Out and your Original Go Black and Gold Celebrity Charity Fan Cruise. But we got to get some unpleasantness out of the way first, and that is the New Orleans Saints dropping to 0-4 on this young season, giving Kellen Moore I guess you can call it the distinction of being only the second coach in Saints franchise history to start his coaching career 0-4. The first being the first coach in Saints franchise history, Tom Fears, who went 0-4 to start. Actually, Tom Fears went 0-7 to start the 1967 campaign, the first ever for the Saints. Let's hope Moore doesn't set that dubious record. But I'll tell you this, Brendan, you and I talked on our show on Wednesday about how we were going to watch to see how Kellen Moore and the Saints players responded to an absolute embarrassment last week on the road at Seattle. And this being maybe a turning point or certainly a key point in the season for them, whether they would, the Saints, would come out with any fight, any any fight to see how they battled. And I personally thought that they battled pretty well today. We'll get into some of the specifics of the game in a minute. But Brennan, do you agree? Do you think the Saints did it surprise you by the Saints' performance today? Brendan, you're muted.
Thank you. That's what happens when you're coughing all the time and you just want to mute yourself and make sure it doesn't come through the microphones. But yeah, I think when the Saints came out offensively and responded to the opening drive touchdown from Buffalo, that drive, I felt there was a lot of confidence out of Spencer Rattler. I thought that the Saints offense came out with a different intensity than they have throughout the rest of the season to this point. And so I think that really set the tone. Obviously, going into halftime only down 4 against what some are going to tell you is one of the better teams in football, a true Super Bowl contender on the road. I think that a lot of those things showed me that they did have a bitter taste in their mouth after just an absolute embarrassing showing last week in Seattle. So those things impressed me. You threw out a fun number with Kellen Moore starting 0-4. So I'm going to throw out a fun number back at you. Spencer Rattler is now the 5th quarterback in the history of the NFL to start 0-10. Not a great list. I don't know if I can name the rest of them off the top of my head. I know Deshaun Kaiser's on that list.
He is.
I know that Derek Carr is on that list. Carr's the only one who ended up having a decent NFL career. There was a random quarterback that started 2 years, retired, came out of retirement, started a game, played 2 snaps, then had a season-ending injury, but the team went on to win the game, so that's how he broke his streak. I can't remember the guy's name, but it's not a great list.
I'll have to look it up. That'll be my homework assignment between now and Wednesday. in Troy Aikman's rookie year with the Dallas Cowboys, the Cowboys went 1-15. And if I'm not mistaken, Aikman didn't even start that game that they won. Steve Walsh was the injury replacement when they beat the Washington Redskins.
I know Aikman's not on the list. I know for a fact
Interesting.
Aikman's not on that list. I'll have to see if I can pull up the list while we're discussing at some point. We can close the show with that official list, but it's not a great list. But Rattler starts 0-10. I do want to get on the conversation, Spencer Rattler. I do want to save that for later, and maybe close out with that, because I know a lot of you watching have opinions on where the Saints need to go quarterback wise and this, that, and the other. Do you want to start with positives or negatives?
You know what? This year has been such a negative so far. Let's start with some positives. And my biggest positive was the Saints rushing attack.
Yeah.
The Saints for the game ran for 189 yards. Alvin Kamara 70 yards on the ground. Kendre Miller, you especially have been crying, screaming for better usage, more usage of Kendre Miller, and we saw that today. Kendre Miller rushed for 65 yards, and Spencer Rattler had 49 yards rushing. For the criticisms that we're going to have of Rattler in a minute, I thought that he showed decisiveness with his legs. He didn't, when he saw a lane to take off and run on scrambles, he didn't hesitate at all. 189 yards on the ground from New Orleans. I think that we're starting to see an offensive identity begin to reveal itself for the Saints. Is that Kellen Moore wants to not only revolve his attack around the run, but absolutely lean on the rushing attack. And if you get good blocking like you did up front, and Kamara and Kendre running as decisively as they did, I think you're able to stay in a lot of games. If you get some defensive stops, if you run the ball like the Saints ran it today.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I've been begging for a better use of Kendre Miller. We talked about early in the year how we felt that the use of Kendre Miller could do a couple things for the Saints. It could give you a little bit of a change of pace in the backfield. It could open up the use of Alvin Kamara more, and that was kind of the biggest point that we made, is you're able to maybe split Kamara wide or get creative and have multiple backs in the backfield. We saw that on one example where Kendre Miller lined up at fullback and he ended up getting.
I love that.
Dive. That's wonderful.
Love that.
You can get more creative that way, and those are the things I wanted to see. It also prolongs the career of Alvin Kamara in a way, because he had 15 carries. I think he had 4 catches for maybe 2 yards is what it ended up being, but it does allow for a guy like Kendre to have 11 carries, be productive, score a touchdown. And he's a bigger guy. And I think that's one thing that we've said a whole lot, and we haven't been able to see a whole lot because he hasn't been on the field. But at 6 foot, like 220, that's a pretty big running back. He's not going to be as elusive. He's not going to have some of the same qualities as Alvin Kamara, but I think he's a great complement to Alvin Kamara, and he is a little bit better in space than a lot of the bigger, more power backs are. He's kind of stuck in the middle. He's not quite a power back, but he's not a scat back either. And I think that's a fun problem to have. I was very satisfied with how they use Kendre today, and hopefully that continues down the road this season to help kind of prolong some things, but also see what you have in Kendre Miller, because outside of a couple game sample size and being in the doghouse with Dennis Allen for what felt like forever, we still don't have a great idea of what Kendre can be at the next level.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was a good indicator of what it could be. Another positive for me was rookie Jonas Sanker, who we didn't know how it was gonna work, right? The secondary's been bad so far this year. They were bad again today, but Sanker was a bright spot, and Sanker has stepped up with some injuries and some question marks. to the Saints safety position. Sanker, 5 tackles, 3 passes defensed, and of course the interception. The first interception of the year for Josh Allen and the Bills. First interception of the year for the Saints as well, if my memory
Yeah.
serves me correctly. So that was big. And I thought that in some tight coverages, he came up and made some plays, obviously with 3 passes defensed. It was good to see some confidence and some growth out of a rookie through just a few games of his NFL career. But for a defense that wasn't great again today, it was nice to see a bright spot for a guy that I know the team was really high on when they drafted him. And so I'm sure for Kellen Moore and the defensive staff, it is nice to kind of reap some benefits of showing belief in a guy through your process, right? I think for any coach, and you being a Hall of Fame coach, as I like to remind you consistently, it is nice to kind of see and reap the rewards of trusting a process with a particular athlete.
Yeah, for sure. And you heard it on the commentary, the TV commentary, about how Allen and the Bills were getting some criticism, for not taking a lot of downfield shots. Well, you watched today, and Sanker made his back-to-back plays on deep shots from Josh Allen. And the Bills really didn't get much down the field, especially down the sidelines or down the seams during the course of today's game. And you have to credit Sanker, and I suppose probably Justin Reed too. Really the only deep ball they had, was the touchdown to Dalton Kincaid late in the fourth quarter that essentially put the game away. That looked like a broken coverage. I'm interested when I go back and rewatch the game myself. I'm interested to take a look at the coach's tape to see if there was a safety that should have had responsibility over the top. Otherwise, you have to question Brandon Staley's sanity, because otherwise it was Carl Granderson responsible for covering Dalton Kincaid 20 yards down the field. But yeah, outside of that play, the Bills didn't get any downfield looks. Now, the secondary, the cornerbacks were still absolutely horrible. Which is something that we'll probably talk more about on our weekly telecast. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I thought Sanker was definitely a bright spot. Carl Granderson played a good game too. Granderson, Brissy, and Cam Jordan all had a sack of Josh Allen today, but Granderson had a couple real nice run stops and a very nice tackle of James Cook in the open field after a reception that put the Buffalo Bills in a third down situation, as opposed to allowing an easy first down. So we keep seeing pretty consistent improvements from Carl Granderson. I think it's safe to say that he is the Saints' most consistent, disruptive defender between the New Orleans down linemen and their edge rushers. Still not elite or in the top echelon by any stretch, but at least you're getting plays from somebody in that area, which is more than you could say for a lot of the other players, that play those positions for New Orleans.
It was nice to see Cam get a sack. I believe it's 124 of his career.
Yeah.
Which I had a conversation with a random fan when I was in Seattle about when you're hitting a certain point in your career, you don't want to end your career with an odd number. And I totally agree with that, right? Like if you're at 124, you want to get to 125. Or you want to get to 130, or just some nice round number. So I'm hoping, I'm not going to predict that Cam gets 6 more sacks this year. We just don't know how that's going to kind of hold up and for him at this stage of his career. But we have seen more pressure and more energy out of Cam through 4 games this year than maybe all of last year, which is a bright spot. I know. I think it was public knowledge he was probably battling a few injuries that weren't showing up on the reports throughout last year, and he was kind of toughening it out. But I would love to see him get to 130 to get to a nice round number before he makes a decision on whether he wants to keep playing or not. Let's get to some negatives. I think the biggest one, and let's go ahead and talk about it, right? It's the one that you and I agreed on when we spent a few minutes talking before we went live. And that's Chris Olave. I think it's time. I think it's time. And we will save some of this for Wednesday. Right? We'll give you a nice little preview into what some of our conversation Wednesday will be. But I'll pose the question, Bob. Is it time to have that conversation about Chris Olave? Because you go back to the San Francisco game, drop pass in the end zone. You look at today where you had a sideline chance. Should have been caught. He bobbles it. Should have been an easy first down on the sideline. You had another opportunity where I believe the term used by the commentary was he had to pirouette to make a catch, but he clearly had both hands on the ball. If he caught it, he would have had his body facing forward to be able to either change direction or continue downfield. He dropped it. It wasn't just a tough game for Chris Olave. Now, if it was one of those things where we had not seen him have some of the struggles that he has so far this year, maybe you are able to use that term and say, oh, it was a tough game, right? But I think we're past that was a tough game for Chris Olave. I think we're at the point where it is Chris Olave a number one receiver? I think we're starting to get the answer there. And then 2, is this a guy you're going to want to move forward with for multiple years because he is at that extension point? It's ironic because Wednesday we talked about, we did the radio rankings, as I like to call it. And I said the most likely thing is one of the vets was going to get moved. But I had used the vet examples of DeMario, Cam, and Alvin.
I brought up Olave, though.
But you brought up Olave, and we even said if you extend that to not by the deadline, but we extend that to by the start of next season, you and I both agreed it's probably Chris Olave. After today's game, not to be the guy who is overreactive or dramatic after a loss, I think we might steer the odds back towards Olave could be a guy that gets dealt by the deadline. He leads the league in targets. The league in targets. And his yards per catch is like just under 7 after today. Or maybe it is right at 7. 3 catches for 20 yards. So maybe right at 7 yards per reception. 1 touchdown this year. It came today. Which, nice route. Good throw by Rattler. Easy touchdown, right? We're not going to sit there and scream the praises of either of those guys for that touchdown, but that is something you're like, oh, okay, look, like they can play competent football. Like it's an easy pitch and catch, fit it in a window. Good job, guys. But it was bad. Today was bad. And going back to one of my favorite drafts that we've covered because we were both right with 2 picks in the first round. That rarely happens with Olave and Penning. The couple things we said about Chris Olave was he had a sneaky ability to be able to take the top off. Haven't seen a whole lot of that. I think that's a lot more just offensive play calling than anything this year, which we'll get into that more on Wednesday as well. We said that he had maybe the best hands in the draft that year. In terms of being a consistent receiver. We're not seeing that this year.
Nope. I called him an elite route runner coming out of Ohio State.
Not seeing that. Which makes me go back to last year, which I don't want to bring up a whole lot of last year because a lot of the issues we had last year were centered around number 4. I won't even say his name. But Remember through that year, 2 years with 4, there was a lot of back and forth with Chris Olave. And I think most of us in the media and in Saints fans as well were quick to come to the defense of Olave. Do I dare say maybe 4 was more right about things that I want to admit? Do I dare want to say that? Because I'm not going to go as far to call him a diva. I don't get a whole lot of that vibe from Olave compared to some other receivers in Saints history. one of them is still on the roster. He just made a comeback. Oop, what? I'll let you guys assume. But I am getting to that point where it's, man, if this guy demands any sort of like elite money or wide receiver one money, there's no chance the Saints are going to pay him. But two, I don't think, like, is he helping your team at this point? He had 10 catches last week for 55 yards, 56 yards. Again, you cannot control the play calls. I understand that. I understand that's what some of you are going to say. But my issue is, I think we've gotten to the point where we can confidently say Olave's not a number one receiver.
Wholeheartedly agree. And I'm going to write about this on Saints Wire this week. I think it's time to trade Chris Olave. Not have the conversation. I think it's time to move Chris Olave. Because I've been an Olave defender over the last year and a half, as he's gotten a lot of criticism, from fans and even some analysts. I still believe that Chris Olave is a very good route runner, but he's cutting off his routes. He's not finishing routes. He's dropping a ton of passes. He dropped 2 today. The one that you talked about in the first half along the sidelines that would have extended the drive. It had been an easy first down. Wide receivers at every level of football make that catch routinely. And those are the type of plays, routine plays, that Chris Olave is not making. The conversation needs to be had before you decide to trade him. Does he make? Are we a worse team without Chris Olave? And that's why I think you move him, because I don't think you are a worse team without Chris Olave. Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheed, hell, Mason Tipton, and Devon Vele. They can put up these stat lines. They can average less than 8 yards a reception, which is what Olave has been. I think you make your team potentially better by moving on from him now or soon, before the trade deadline, to get a couple draft picks in return. If you're a rebuilding team, then you asked the question on Wednesday, Brendan, out loud, and you just asked it now. Is Chris Olave a piece that you want to build or rebuild your team around? And I don't think the answer is yes. Mainly because he's going to be asking for maybe not elite wide receiver money, but certainly number one wide receiver money. And it's very clear that he's not a number one wide receiver. So it takes absolute insanity to pay a guy that kind of money when he's not going to give you that kind of production. That's why I think you cut ties, you move on, because it's not going to make your passing game any worse. This is one of the most ridiculous passing games in the league. I'm not necessarily faulting. I'm not faulting one person. I'm not faulting Chris Olave. I'm not faulting Spencer Rattler. I'm not faulting Kellen Moore. And the play call. I'm faulting all of them. You're not getting, although I thought the first half pass protection was decent today, but you're not getting consistent pass protection. We talked about Olave. Jawan Johnson is not making the plays that he should. Spencer Rattler he's just flat out not looking down the field. When the play calls for some downfield looks, Rattler's not even looking. When this team got into a must-pass situation today, I cringed because I knew it was going to be ugly, and sure enough, it was. This passing game is almost a joke right now. When you complete 18 passes and they're only for 125 yards, and this is a weekly type of stat line from Spencer Rattler. Again, I'm not blaming only Rattler, folks. I'm throwing a blanket over the whole shebang. Rattler, Olave, the other receivers, Jawan, the tight end, Kamara out of the backfield, not using Kamara wisely as a receiver, the pass protect. It's all awful right now. And again, how could it be any worse without Chris Olave? At least then you'd be giving some of your other receivers a chance to see what you have depth-wise on this roster before you go into the offseason. And yes, after week 4, I'm talking that way. I'm not giving up on the season, but you have to find out what you have. And if you continue to force the ball to Chris Olave, maybe to fit the narrative that he is a number 1 type of receiver, that's not finding out what you have, because you already know the answer to that question. You're just refusing to accept it. So yes, it is 100% time to move on from Chris Olave.
I think it's a good way to kind of pivot into Spencer Rattler. You addressed very well some of the other uglies from today, the pass offense as a whole. Let's open up some of the conversation with Spencer Rattler and close today's conversations with Spencer Rattler. I don't really want to talk about the defense, unless you do. I don't really want to go any further into the defense outside of...
No. We talked the run defense. If we're doing a good, bad, and ugly, and by the way, that will be my my Monday morning article on Saints Wire. My bad is the Saints run defense. James Cook is a quality back, but you gave up 5.5 yards of carry to him. We already talked about, like you said, Brendan, how bad the cornerbacks were in the first half, and you have to generate more. Rasheed, Granderson, Cam, they had a nice sack apiece, a key sack each, but you need more consistent pressure, and you're not getting it. In a nutshell, the defense is an ongoing problem. After being a strength for the first week and a half, this defense is plummeting quickly. That's all I got to say about the defense.
We'll see if they can right the ship next week against a team who's now going to be without their number 1 wide receiver. In Malik Neighbors, which that didn't look good.
No.
But we'll go and we'll talk Spencer Rattler. We'll close the show on Spencer Rattler. Here's your stats. Remember, I told you I'd find them. And I was mistaken. You were right. Troy Aikman's on this list, but we'll get to that. So here are your quarterbacks that have started their career 0-10 or worse, right? Didn't realize this guy was on the list either, but Warren Moon, a Hall of Famer, started his career 0-10 with the Oilers in '84. Zach Mettenberger started his career 0-10 with the Titans. Brody Croyle started 0-10 with the Chiefs. He had a couple different starts between 07 and 10. Derek Carr, as I mentioned, in 2014 with the Raiders. Here's the guy I was talking about, Stan Gelbaugh. 0-11 between the Cardinals and the Seahawks. He didn't get his first NFL start until he was 28. Went 0-3 with the Cardinals in 91, 0-8 with the Seahawks in 92. He got a win in his final start at the age of 34. He started and was injured after 2 passes, but he got credit for the win. That was his only career win. So what a way to go out. Troy Aikman was 0-11 with the Cowboys in 89. Jack Trudeau, 0-12 with the Colts in 86, 87. And then, of course, the worst, who I mentioned, Deshaun Kaiser, went 0-15 in his NFL career. Spencer Rattler is now on that list at 0-10. I think all of those guys, if you go back, obviously, I mentioned 2 Hall of Famers on that list, right, with Warren Moon and Troy Aikman. Any of you that say, and I'm just going to go ahead and get this off now, any of you that say, oh, well, like 0-10, that shows you like where Spencer Rattler is as a quarterback, and we need to move on, or we need to do this. I don't know. He was playing with some really bad talent last year, like really bad talent.
Yeah, I don't put the 0-10 on Spencer Rattler completely. I put numbers like at the bottom of the screen on Spencer Rattler.
Yeah. I will give Spencer Rattler credit for what you gave him credit for at the top of the show. Was he was very decisive in stepping up in the pocket and going. But that also goes back to a lot of Spencer Rattler's college tape, which you can either take as a positive or negative. It is very much like 1 read and go. 2 reads maybe and go. He's not a guy that, at least in my opinion, has done a very good job of looking through all of his progressions before going. Now, some of that is also Saints offensive line in his 10 NFL starts has not maybe provided him a whole lot of time in the pocket, but at the end of the day, he's never really read a defense well. That's why
I was going to,
why he struggled. That's why he struggled at South Carolina. He showed more promise at South Carolina than Oklahoma.
Yeah.
but he got benched at Oklahoma because he couldn't read a defense. Unfortunately, we're starting to see a little bit of that creep into the NFL, where everything gets sped up. You still can't read a defense. You still are looking at one guy and go, and that's why you have all of these receivers for the Saints and Jawan Johnson and Alvin Kamara all averaging like 7-8 yards or less per catch. The only frustration that I have, and given Rattler's accuracy downfield is not good, and it never was in college.
No.
But can we try? Can we try to throw the ball downfield? That's my one knock, is you have guys like, if I'm Rashid Shaheed, like I feel bad for Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
Because it's like, he's one of the fastest dudes in the NFL. Can you give him a shot downfield? I know they did week 1 against Arizona and Will Johnson intercepted, but there was a defensive hold or whatever on the other side of the field. But I would love to see it. Give me 1 or 2 of those a game. I'm not seeing that. That is the frustration there. I think that some of that's play calling. Some of that's just the fact that the Saints are not in situations to maybe take shots downfield with where they are in the game at that point, right? When you're down 2 scores, do you really want to take 50-50 shots downfield? I don't know. I know a lot of you guys are going to be on the fence, or I should say half of you guys are in one spot, half of you guys are in another. I've already seen on Twitter, half of you are saying, well, this isn't on Spencer Rattler. Like, this isn't Spencer Rattler's fault. Like, get him talent, or get him receivers, or get him whatever. I don't necessarily agree with the second half of that. I won't say it's all on Spencer Rattler. Kind of like what Bob said. This is a melting pot of issues offensively. And I think Bob did a wonderful job of explaining why it's a melting pot of issues. It's not all on Spencer Rattler. But a handful of it is. Then you have the other half of you that are like, this is completely on Spencer Rattler, and we need to make the change at quarterback. Okay. Let's play that game for a second, folks. Do you think that it's going to get any better with a quarterback who, especially in this game where Rattler had 49 rushing yards, you think it's going to get any better with a quarterback who's less athletic than Spencer Rattler?
I don't know if I agree with that one.
I think he's less athletic, not by a lot, but I think Rattler's more mobile than Shuck. We don't have to agree, but Shuck might have a better deep ball accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair to say. He does have a better deep ball accuracy, but do you really think it's going to get that much better? So I would want to pick the brains of people who are very ready to start the Tyler Shuck experience, because that's why you drafted him. We've both said it, Bob. Like, it's going to happen at some point this season, right? But when is the right time has been the question. But also I want to pick the brains of, are you guys wanting to see Shuck because you want to win football games? Or are you wanting to see Shuck because you want to start the experience now, opposed to just prolonging the Spencer Rattler experience? That would be my question. Because I think if you make the change now, right, let's say hypothetically and make the change going into week 5, a home game against New York, the Giants. You make it now. One, I don't think that does anything to help you win football games immediately. I think maybe it gives a different juice and different energy to some of the fan base. I think it brings a different juice or energy maybe to the offense. But ultimately, I don't think that affects how many games you win this year. Also, if you do that, you're telling Spencer Rattler his future is not here, which is fine. He was a 5th-round pick, right? He could go and be a backup elsewhere and still have a decent NFL career. But that does make it a little, I would assume it makes it a little awkward in the quarterback room. And it's not like you have a real veteran in that quarterback room to kind of like help everything and mediate some of those situations, right? Like the Giants, weird situation, but they do have 2 veterans there, right? And you have a guy like Jameis who could, kind of mediate, mend some things. You don't really have that in New Orleans. I think it would just be weird. Now, I'm not saying the Saints need to go find a veteran quarterback to make this move. I just don't think now's the right time. Now, if the Saints end up starting the year 0-7, even if you get to, week 8, week 9, and maybe they've won a game or two, maybe at that point you're like, okay, let's make the change. Let's give Tyler the second half of the year. For all of you that are like begging for that change or pointing all the fingers at Spencer Rattler, do you really think making just a change at quarterback is going to solve any of your issues? Because I think this team is rooted in bad offensive play calling right now. I think they're rooted in not getting the most out of their skill position players. We just talked about Chris Olave. And you've shuffled an offensive line for 4 weeks. This is the first time you had your projected starting 5 start. Ruiz got hurt in the game. We'll see if that ends up lingering into the next few weeks. Ultimately, Bob. So Bob's like, yes, literally anyone else.
I thought Torricelli Simpkins played very well in relief of Cesar Ruiz through the second half. I'm not saying Simpkins is the answer there, but we know Ruiz isn't. And I was being partially facetious. I certainly don't wish a serious injury on Ruiz or anybody else, but I have been calling for Ruiz to be replaced in the lineup. From that sidebar interruption, I defer back to you.
I was going to say, does anybody have the picture? Because I know every week we have a picture of Ruiz being turned around. So if anybody's got that, drop it in the comments. I'd love to see it. I haven't seen one yet. No, ultimately, I guess the question mark is, one, where do you, Bob, sit with Spencer Rattler? How much longer do you want to have the Spencer Rattler experience? Do you think Spencer Rattler did enough to earn a week 5 start? And then finally, how much of the offensive struggles do you put on Spencer Rattler? I know you said it's a little bit of everybody, but let's dive into that a little bit more.
You mentioned the play calling, and I have been critical of the play calling through the first 3 weeks. I'm not going to be as critical of the play calling today. I thought they kept the Bills off balance. We talked about the running game. They had some combination routes from the best I could see, and everything like that. But having said that, I make the move for a couple of reasons. The question I asked about Chris Olave before now applies to Spencer Rattler. Is moving to Tyler Shuck make your team worse? We don't know the answer to that question,
but probably not. Like, you can't get much worse,
and that's just it. I mean, maybe Shuck has a slightly lower completion percentage, throws a couple of picks down the field, but creates a couple big plays. Maybe you unlock Chris Olave's and Rashid Shaheed's big play potential that we have literally seen zero of this year. In other words, maybe Tyler Shuck's style of quarterbacking is more conducive for the speed that you have at wide receiver than what Spencer Rattler's quarterbacking style is. And I feel a little bit conflicted saying this because Spencer Rattler has not played poorly enough to deserve being benched. However, when you're 0-4, and I'm not saying Kellen Moore is coaching for his job because after 4 games, that's a little bit ridiculous. But Kellen Moore is coaching for the betterment of the team. And how much upside do you really see in Spencer Rattler? And I think that's the question that needs to be asked here. Not, is Tyler Shuck a better quarterback than Spencer Rattler or vice versa? What is your upside by continuing to play Spencer Rattler? And the answer is, I don't think there is much more upside than what we have seen. Is he a capable quarterback in certain systems? Yeah. I think he's shown that he's not going to make a back-breaking mistake, but he's not going to put you in positions to win the game either. He's the guy who I would feel comfortable coming off the bench to finish off a game, maybe even to give me a couple starts if I had a good roster. But you don't. And we keep asking, you need, with different positions, you need to find out what you have. You need to find out what you have. Well, in Tyler Shuck, you need to find out what you have. I'm not necessarily calling for Spencer Rattler to be benched right now, but I think if I was making the decision, if I were Kellen Moore, given everything that I just said, what kind of upside do I have with Spencer Rattler? Feeling like you kind of know the answer to that question right now, or at least you feel pretty comfortable with the answer to that question. I think now you make the move to Shuck. Maybe not in the Giants game, but certainly in the next couple weeks. You play on paper what's an easier part of your schedule. You have a couple home games coming up. Like I said, if it's me, I bench Rattler for Shuck this week. But I'm not opposed to giving Rattler another game, another get-right game against a pretty bad Giants team. Hey, maybe you still can turn this thing around. So while I said, I would make a move, I'm not going to pound the table or scream it from a mountaintop either.
So let me ask you this, because you brought up a couple home games against some poor competition on paper. Let's say all goes well, Rattler starts, and the Saints win against New York. I think it would then be very difficult to then pull the plug before they play against New England. Let's say they beat New England at home. Well, then it's really hard to go pull the plug the following week.
Yeah.
Right? So you have that as well. Is okay, let's say he wins a few. At that point, it becomes a little bit harder to kind of go, okay, let's make the switch. It's a little harder to call to the bullpen after your pitchers got out of a jam once or twice.
Which, by the way, would be fine by me. I just want to win games. I don't care if it's Genghis Khan back there at quarterback. If Genghis Khan can hit a receiver in stride, make plays down the field, and put your team in a position to win, then I'm Team Genghis.
Ultimately, that's what Saints fans want as a whole, or what Saints fans should want, right?
Yeah.
Just to win games.
You hit a key phrase there, my friend.
Yeah, should want. I would keep Spencer in. If he struggles against New York, I think at that point you're really looking to make the switch. If he wins against New York, let's see if he beats New England, and I think that's the route you kind of go. I'm not sure if that's the correct route. That's why I'm sitting on this side and not in the front office or as a head coach. But I think that's the direction I would go. And I think some of that, too, is rewarding Spencer Rattler for I hate the phrase, but I'll use it anyway. I do think that he's got some dog in him. And he's not a quitter, right? He's a guy who's going to fight for you. And I think you have to reward that in an NFL. And we talked about this on Wednesday, or maybe it was last week, where we live in an NFL and a pro sports world where we are seeing less and less of that from players, where players just don't. We talked about it on Wednesday because we're talking about Chase Young, Javion Clowney, where guys maybe just don't love the game. At least with Spencer Rattler, can see a guy who loves the game and wants to win football games. And I do think that needs to be rewarded. I don't know how much longer it needs to be rewarded, but I think it should be rewarded. With that, I think we will have a very interesting show on Wednesday. I think we have plenty to talk about going into Wednesday. Bob, do you have any final closing thoughts before we tell everybody about our friends at Get Checked or Check Out?
Again, if we're gonna end on a positive, and I always like to when they give us something positive to end on,
right?
I feel like the Saints at least showed us that they have some fight in them, as a team. They came out. I mean, if the Buffalo Bills and the Seattle Seahawks played each other on a neutral site, Buffalo could win by 40. They have that much more talent. And the Saints did not back down from a challenge. They had some adversity. New Orleans did. You expect a young team or a rebuilding team that's already coming off getting your ass handed to you. If you face some adversity the following week, especially on the road against a better opponent, a lot of times you see teams kind of fold up their tents. The Saints did not. They continued to fight. They continued to fight right down until the final drive. So I came away impressed with Kellen Moore that staff, that coaching staff, the leadership, and the young core on that team for the fight. I think we'll see more games like we did in the first 2 weeks and today than what we did against Seattle through the rest of the season. And that gives you something positive to take away.
Yeah, games that are going to be competitive, at least for a good chunk of the game, right? And we've talked about this. I don't see this being a team that's like as bad as like the 0-16 Lions, where it's just every week they're getting their asses handed to them, to say what just to steal your phrase. I think this is going to be a team that's going to be bad, but they're going to win a handful of games, and they're not going to get blasted every week, like the Carolina Panthers, who got annihilated today. Right after a week where they looked good, it was like, oh, here we are. It was that's bad. They are bad. And I can tell you, people in the city did not think they were going to be that bad. People in the city actually had hopes that maybe they could be a team that wins like 6 or 7 games.
National pundits too, because Bryce Young played some competent football down the stretch of last year.
Not just competent, he played good football down the stretch last year.
He did.
But he's now reverted back to, you paid Andy Dalton all that money to be the backup quarterback. And I think some of those, we're talking about us and having a situation where it's like, you got 2 young quarterbacks. At what time do you pull it? It's like, do you need to sit Bryce again for the second straight year? I know CJ Stroud's had his struggles, but I will mount my flag into going into that draft and saying CJ Stroud is head and shoulders, because he's taller, head and shoulders better than Bryce Young in that draft. I will mount my flag.
This week's dad jokes are brought to you by Mr. Brendan Boylan.
Thank you. But no, it's true. Like I am so proud of saying that. Is like Stroud was such a better NFL prospect, and I know it's not over for either of those guys yet. But man, Bryce has looked bad.
Yeah.
And with that, let's actually talk about who sponsors our show instead of just who sponsors our dad jokes.
We'd like to thank Get Checked or Check Out, not only for sponsoring us, but giving us the opportunity to promote you. Get Checked or Check Out is a site that's there for you, there for us. If you or a loved one has received a medical diagnosis that just has you in terror, not knowing where to turn next, so a combination of fear and confusion. tcynow.org is the website for Get Checked or Check Out, and they will steer you in the directions that you need to go, whether it's treatment options, therapy options, just really anything. Get Checked or Check Out wants us to remind you that September, as we wind down September, is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. So please make those appointments. Keep those appointments. And this is the type of disease that can be, if it's caught before it spreads, has a 97% chance of survival rate. So like I said, if you're overdue, even if you're not overdue, make that appointment, get yourself checked. If you know friends and family members who maybe could or should take care of themselves better, get on their backs too. And like I said, if you get a diagnosis that just doesn't have you, has you in a position where you just don't know where to turn next, Get Checked or Check Out is there for us. tcynow.org is there for a reason. But again, they need our help to help us. So go to that website, donate a little bit, encourage your friends, your family members to do the same. Now, the primary money raiser that Get Checked or Check Out does every single year is the original Go Black and Gold Celebrity Charity Fan Cruise. The 2026 cruise is March 26th through March 30th. It's sailing out of Jacksonville, Florida this year, not New Orleans, and it's docking in the Bahamas. That part I'm really excited for. If you're coming from the Gulf Coast or New Orleans area, there are packages that are leaving for Saints fans that are going to be on this cruise. Reach out to me if you need any details about that. Otherwise, book your cabin now. the number I gave you guys earlier, I hope you wrote it down, but I'm going to give it to you again. You can book through Summer Cochran at Seven Seas Travel. Summer's number is 985-643-6958. You can also contact Shireen DeWalt at Get Checked or Check Out for booking opportunities. When you book that cabin, make sure you mention Brendan, myself, and the Bayou Blitz. Summer will take care of you. Again, those dates are March 26th through March 30th. Please book that cabin today. Make your plans today. It only takes a small down payment to book, and then you can pay off the rest early into 2026 after you already get Christmas out of the way. The Saints greats that are going to be on this year's cruise, the ones that have confirmed so far: Delvin Breaux, Tyrone Hughes, Michael Lewis, Courtney Roby, and Pierre Thomas. There will be more to come, but these 5 are already confirmed. And guys, they're going to be intermixed with you the whole trip. On the deck, at dinner, in the bars, in the casinos, on the beach. They're hanging out with you. Their families are hanging out with you. It's not going to be a situation that, oh, you get 1 hour opportunity to hang out with these guys at Q&A sessions, which there will be plenty of, or autographs. No, they're hanging out with you the whole time. That's what puts this event, one of many things that puts this event separate and better than so many other events sponsored by all NFL teams, not just the New Orleans Saints. And again, booking this trip, going on this trip, it gives you the vacation of a lifetime while also donates to a terrific cause. So we thank Get Checked or Check Out for being there for us. But folks, I'm asking you to be there for them.
Well said, Bob. And we're excited to continue to promote all that they are doing through not just the remainder of this season, but for hopefully many years to come down the road. Bob Rose is going to have plenty for you guys to read this week. A game balls, good, bad, and ugly. Just a few to start. We're going to have a show for you guys on Wednesday where we dive into I'll go ahead and say it, Bob. We're going to dive into what changes need to happen offensively, if any, that surrounded around play calling, personnel, etc. It'll be a fun conversation on Wednesday, so you guys let us know exactly what you guys want us to talk about. So until Wednesday, that's Bob Rose. I'm Brendan Boylan. Thanks for tuning in to the Bayou Blitz post-game show. And until Wednesday, hope you guys find peace, spread love, practice positivity. We will see you then. Who dat?